Yes, now I believe we are live. Very much welcome to this year's launch of the Joint Workplace Revolution Report, the 2023 edition that we're launching here today together with this webinar event as well. It's very exciting times to talk about the future of work, and especially as we now begin to emerge from a global pandemic that kind of forced us to rethink how we work. So today we are super thrilled to be sharing some of the key insights and trends from our research on the future of work. And together with our guests, we will also explore how to future-proof our offices, and particularly in the light of the changing economic climate and the implications of hybrid work and the overall focus on well-being, employees, and mental health. And this event is particularly timely now as we're continuing to navigate through a period of significant change. Employees have new demands and expectations, and decision makers need to adapt and find new solutions into how to meet these evolving needs. For those of you who don't know CORE since before, we're a leading facility management service provider in the Nordics, and we strive to create the happiest, healthiest, and the most prosperous workplace environments in the Nordics. My name is Sara, and I'm one of CORE's workplace strategists in what we call CORE Advisory. And Advisory is our consultancy that helps our customers and guides them through the complexity of various workplace challenges. And with me here today, I have my colleague Anton Erholm, acting head of CORE Advisory Group. And with us on link, we also have our Danish colleague, Helle Nør, head of advisory in Denmark.
Hello.
But that's not all. We also have some exciting guests with us here today. We have Nina Adelgren, facility management responsible at the Swedish energy company Kraftringen. And last but not least, we have Per Christian Helland, Head of Strategy and People Experience at the Norwegian financial institution Storebrand. And we hope that today's discussion will inspire some new ideas and maybe spark some important conversations and ultimately help us to create better, more productive, more fulfilling workplaces of the future. And at the end of this session, we will make some times for questions. So if anything pops up along the way as we discussing the different topics here, don't hesitate to use the Q&A function that you can find here at the top of the screen, and we'll address as many questions as we have time for at the end. And lastly, I just want to note that this webinar will be recorded and also later distributed in the email that we will send out after the event. So without further ado, let's just dive into the workplace revolution and explore what lies ahead in this area. Our first topic of today is the economic climate and how the current situation affects our workplaces and our working life. And during this last year, I think that we are many who has found some new interest in the energy prices and the food prices and maybe the interest rates as well to this. And because of that, that has naturally been one of the focus areas in this year's report as well. So Anton, I want to start asking you, what can we see in the report? What are the data about the economic climate? How does it affect our workplaces?
Let's have a look, Sarah. As you say, obviously this is a point of interest from us, and we have been looking quite diligently at how the economic instabilities have affected both employees as well as decision makers in how we relate to the workplace and whether we work remotely or in office. And if we start from the employee perspective, we looked at whether the cost of living, so that could be, for example, food, energy, transportation costs, have impacted the way we work or relate to the workplace. And the data actually indicate that it has led to a reduced likelihood for employees to come to the office on a net basis. And we can see that actually 1 in 4 employees in the Nordics are less likely to come into the office today due to the increased cost of living that we actually have now compared to last year. To nuance the question, we actually do see, however, that 1 in 10 employees choose to come into the office more likely today due to the exact same reasons, which kind of plays to the individual prerequisites and circumstances that could affect the cost for each individual employee and depending on the company location, etc. And if we move to the middle part of the slide, we also looked from a company perspective, and we can clearly see that new cost initiatives and focus has increased the projects in both office energy savings, which is the most prominent one, but also actually led to a reduction in spending in community as well as office modernizations. And this is quite interesting as other parts of the study really show how these areas are quite important for the employees. And it kind of shows to the balancing act that a lot of companies need to work with now with cost control on one hand, but also ensuring healthy, thriving workplaces on the other hand. And finally, we were also very interested in to see how the employee demands on the employers and the companies have affected or changed since last year. We can actually see that the trend is quite flat. It hasn't changed that much, and we can conclude that there are still very high requirements that employees have on their employers and companies when it comes to individual flexibility as well as office improvements. And when we talk about flexibility here, it's not necessarily working fully remote, but rather having the flexibility of choosing when and where you work. And it's quite clear from the data that these factors are something that's quite important for employees and can impact whether or not they wish to stay at their current employer or would resign and move to another employer unless these needs are fulfilled, which we thought was interesting.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And something that just popped into my head now, that in the middle section you mentioned that we could see some differences regarding maybe where people lived and how far the commute was as well. Can we see any demographical or maybe geographical differences in regard to the resignation part here as well? Can we see, say, is it more common in the younger or the elder, or?
There is quite large variations depending on the demographics as well as the geography. So we can, for instance, see that the requirements that employees have on their employers for the younger generation is quite a lot higher than for an older generation. So there's a factor of 1.5 to 2 in comparison between those two age groups. And we can also see that the more densely populated areas, so larger cities, for example, have higher requirements as opposed to more rural areas or less densely populated areas.
Yeah, interesting to hear. Now I also want to invite one of our first guests into this discussion as well, Per Christian. In relation to the numbers that we could see here and the insights from the study, do you experience any of this in Storebrand, or what are your reflections when you hear these numbers?
Well, I think I could start with sharing a fun fact about the use of hot water in the office that we actually saw during the winter, that it was a dramatic increase. So probably more people choose to take the shower at work rather than home. So that could be an argument that people actually came more to the office due to the cost of living. Besides that, we haven't really seen any difference. It's been sort of stable and increasing, as we will come back to later, I think, maybe why. But of course, in general, it's sort of a tough economic climate, which affects everybody as individuals and as a company. But yeah, I think it's a good spirit in terms of office and culture and all that around it.
Interesting, yeah. It's very fun about the shower as well. People find every measures, I guess, to keep the cost down. I also want to ask you, since your role is head of people experience, do you have any suggestions on how, if you're a company here that tries to keep the investments in the office and the community and all of that down, Do you have any suggestions on how you can do that without compromising the experience for the employees, or do you think, is it even possible, or do you need to kind of put in some pennies if you want an effect of it?
Yeah, so I don't know if you can increase people experience by cutting cost itself, but it's not all about the money. It's for instance about making people meet and discuss and share knowledge. I think that also is something that increases the experience of working in a company, and to do that you could do, for instance, something around the coffee. Coffee is cheap. You don't even need to buy something new. You can just rearrange where coffee is actually available, and by doing that you can make people behave differently. So I think that is one example how you can actually increase the experience of being in the office without using any money, really. We also asked people to put up a post-it note by the coffee machine asking, why are you in the office today? And we see, it's everything from I lost my place in the home office to my wife or husband to great to meet colleagues to actually good coffee. So I don't think it's a sort of you don't need to invest a lot of money to increase the experience, but of course over time you might need some investments to do more the bigger changes.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting what you're saying here about just be better at visualizing maybe what you already have, because you have probably good things and good attributes in your office. Maybe just the employees might be taking them a bit for granted, or maybe they've even forgot about some of the solutions that you're offering as an employer. So I think you can do a lot just looking at what do we have that we could communicate in a better way. Super interesting.
I can actually share one other thing we did just after the pandemic, and it was sort of a measure we did to make people sort of believe in or experience the benefit of meeting other people, because we sat at home during working hours, but also during leisure time, and we didn't meet so many people. So we created the Storebrand Tuesday, where we just encourage people to come into the office to learn again, to meet other people, and to do that we sort of had some cheap coffee, but also we created some arenas to share knowledge and make events. So it didn't cost us a lot, but it was important for people to restart the social life in work.
Interesting, for sure. I also want to invite Nina into this dialogue here on the economic climate and the implications of that. How does the current situation affect your priorities and strategies for the workplace? Maybe do you see any change of behavior, expectations among your employees based on this?
Yeah, first of all, being an energy company, we need to work with energy savings, but that actually also made us work a little bit more with it internally, because you know how it is. You're good at what you prepare for others, but maybe you don't always take care of it that well in your own office. So we work a lot with energy savings and also communicate about them, and have our employees to give us ideas on how to improve even more, and their ideas help us. When it comes to our offices, they are different. We have one headquarter with activity-based working, and we have also other production area offices where they have standard seating. So that's a bit different in our different offices. When it comes to employees' cost saving, okay, the people that have to commute quite a bit, of course, they like being able to work remotely. However, we do have a guideline supporting how to work remotely and in the office, and how to balance that. Because it's not always the better way to work remotely, maybe for the office or for the group, even if it is for the individual due to costs. So that's quite a tricky balance. One more thing with regards to the economic situation, we do plan for well-being activities, both in physical and mental health in our offices, even though, because we try to think that we need to look in a longer perspective.
Yeah. Interesting, definitely. And I also want to think back to invite Helle to the discussion here as well, because you're our advisor expert with us here today. And do you, based on your experience over these last couple of years, you've been both an architect and an advisor, how we can see here in the data that people are less implied to invest in the office and office modifications, renovations, updating the office in general. How do you see any risks of this trend going this way, that we're now willing to invest less?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a risk if you have a very bad starting point. So there might be a lot of very good workplaces where it's entirely possible to focus on maybe investing in culture and community and coffee and friendships in work, which we know is a very big driver for people to actually get into the commute and go to work. But I think that there are also a lot of offices that are not really well functioning. So they are not designed in a way that people can actually do their job in a very good manner. So they can't be productive and they can't be effective and they can't meet their colleagues. So I think that if you are in that starting point and you're looking to cut cost in investing on that, maybe that can be a danger in the long run, because as we also see in this report, a lot of people are very willing to change jobs if their needs are not being met. So definitely it is a risk, but it depends on your starting point.
Yeah, for sure. Do you even see some opportunities maybe, or is it just risks all about it?
No, I think that if we could all, it has been tough times for the last 3 years. We've been through so many changes. We've had to adapt to so many new circumstances, and that has been difficult. It has created loneliness. It has created a sense of maybe not belonging to the workplace, therefore being inclined to find another job. But if we try to put on our positive attitude, there are so many opportunities now, because maybe the way we were working before was not very effective or productive or even the right way of doing it. So now is actually the opportunity for the companies to make strategies about this, make decisions about what type of workplace they want to be, both in the actual office and remotely. So definitely, I think there are so many possibilities of making it a better work life going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. It's time for us to move on to our second topic of today. One of the most prominent trends over the last couple of years has been the question of hybrid work. And we have already been touching upon it in the previous topic, because it's so intertwined in everything that we do about the workplace today, and how we balance the hybrid with the physical present in the office. And as this model presents many benefits, especially maybe for the individual employee, it also presents some challenges, and employers must balance the flexibility with productivity, collaboration, and the overall well-being of our employees, as you have been mentioning here. Anton, if we're looking back at the last couple of years, how has the development of hybrid work been now over the last year, since we've been back from the pandemic about a year?
Yeah, let's have a look. This is obviously something that we at Core have been interested to follow over the past few years, and now we do have several data points to relate to, and we can see from the slide here that there seems to be kind of a plateau at around a bit more than 3 days a week on average in the Nordics that employees spend at the office, quite similar to last year's, but obviously a very significant reduction from the pre-COVID levels. Now, is this the new normal, you might ask? Well, maybe not. Even though we don't see a clear correlation in terms of size of company or the industry itself, if we go deep into the data and look at individual companies, we see that there are significant variations on a individual company level and large discrepancies there, which really talks to the individual companies' specific circumstances and need to adapt to that circumstance in order to create policies and mandates that work for their situation. And if we look at the other part of the slide here, one quite interesting insight we have from the study is that quite a lot more companies today compared to last year claim that they experience difficulties in achieving the desired office presence, regardless of what the policy is. Their desire it's difficult to achieve the desired levels. And if we look at the specifics in the different countries, we see that this is primarily driven by Norway and Denmark, but in fact, all Nordic countries have had an increase in this metric from last year. And this was something that we thought was quite interesting, as one hypothesis we had prior to obtaining the data is that maybe a tougher economic climate could lead to employees being more keen on being in the office physically, whilst this data could talk to the opposite.
Yeah.
One factor that could influence, though, that is worth keeping in mind is that we actually see the companies today compared to last year are a lot more articulate in having a specific policy or mandate as to how many days a week employees per department or company-wide should be at the office, as opposed to having more of an, up to each manager can decide for themselves. Which in turn could lead to more transparency in what the desired levels are and how much in fact employees are at the office. So on a hypothesis level, but could impact. Either way, it's a clear indication that a lot of companies in the Nordics have difficulties obtaining the desired levels.
Yeah, that's probably seems like a reasonable reason maybe for the rise of the percentage here as well, having a specific KPI to kind of measure are our employees here, say 3 days per week, 4 days per week, in compared to right after pandemic when we were a bit more seeking in how to solve this problem.
Definitely.
Yes, and now Nina, I'm a bit curious about you. You have been giving us a bit hint about your hybrid model at Kraftringen, but do you want to elaborate a bit on that model, and maybe if you also recognize yourself in these 70% that we can see here?
Yes, thank you. We do actually see a quite good presence in our offices. In both the headquarters where we have the activity base, but also in the other offices where the production areas are, which is not so strange maybe, because if you work in production, you need to be there to actually perform your work. However, there are other roles there as well where you can work from a distance. And we do have a guideline setting up the rules, but also giving a lot of freedom to the managers and his employees or her employees, because you can decide what's good for your team, what works for your ambition to reach your goals. So we want it to be depend on the trust. So that's a bit how we work on this. But we have seen, but maybe we'll come to that in the next chapter, that we do need to adjust a little bit in our office to the day, how it is today. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, let's save that for the next part maybe. But as you mentioned,
sorry.
No, sorry.
Even if we have a good presence, it's important that we maintain that.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned here, you said that you have a good presence and in alignment, I guess, with your ambition. What do you think are the success factors? Why do you have a good presence in the office?
Yeah, I think that we are it's a lot of people working quite close to where we have our offices. We also do have quite a new office, the headquarters, where it's a good work environment. We can offer some of these extra services that we come to later as well. And also, I think one reason is that some time has now been after the pandemic. In the beginning, after the pandemic, maybe not so many people returned, but now we see the change that they really want to be here. And it's not only for socializing, it's to be able to work together. So I think that's why.
Interesting, yeah. And you mentioned here that you have both, say, a traditional headquarters
Yes.
with what I guess is more of a traditional white collar employees, but you also have the production site. Does your hybrid model differ anything between these different two, say, employer groups? Or
Yeah, we have the same guidelines. So if your role is that you can work from remotely, then it's just the same. But you need to talk to your manager about this. So we have the same. We want to be more or less the same. But of course, if you work inside the production, it's not possible to work from a distance. So
No.
yeah.
No, interesting. Yeah, because I think many can recognize themselves in having this sort of dilemma that has a similar company to yours as well. Like, how should we create that equal policy regarding the hybrid work as we have different groups and different roles with different responsibilities as well?
But it's important that we have the same digital equipment, for example, in the different offices, so that it is possible. So that's what we're working a lot together with our other departments with.
Okay, yeah. So even if the work roles differ in some sense, the setup is still the same, and that's an important signal, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the signals we have done is that we started to improve in the production offices instead of in the headquarters when it comes to the digital equipment. So that's also a good, maybe it could be a good signal.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think so as well. Per Christian, last year's we had a similar webinar to this when we launched the first report, and I want to remember that your hybrid policy was related to that the teams could decide pretty much on their own as long as the business was doing good and the employees was happy. And I guess you can correct me here if I'm mistaken now, but I'm a bit curious now that a year has progressed since you started off with this sort of hybrid model, maybe a year and a half. What are your learnings? Is there something you can share with us? Is this model working for you? Have you developed it in some sense?
Yeah, so we like to say that we prefer dilemmas over rules. So frankly speaking, I think we have succeeded with it. We have a lot of people in the office, and I don't think it would differ if we had maybe more stricter rules. So it's still up to the team to decide, and we encourage all teams to have a dialogue frequently about it, because the situation changes. So if you get a new employee in the team, maybe you need to be more together. If there is maybe more production work, you could do that more remotely. So yeah, the team need to decide, but it's also very early in the hybrid age. We've been doing this for a year, and there is so much to learn.
For sure.
And one aspect I think people are forgetting very easily when they maybe criticize hybrid is that we weren't perfect in 2019 as well. If we remember back then, and you had a meeting or a workshop, it wasn't perfect.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, because I think people could tend to kind of get hung up on, like, how is this hybrid thing? How are we going to create great hybrid meetings that exceed all of our expectations about it? But maybe, as you say, maybe it wasn't perfect before that either. But I'm also a bit curious, have you been able to track any, say, effects or so at this point?
Yeah. So one important measure for us is the engagement score. We sort of use a pulse survey tool, and we have been doing that since 2017 or something. And it did start to increase during the pandemic, actually, and all the way until this year. So it seems like the new way of working is positive on general note. And again, there is much to learn. It doesn't work perfectly in all teams, but we now want to sort of strengthen our the focus on getting more knowledge about it. So we are so lucky that we are in a research project together with a Norwegian research company called Sintef, but it's all actually Swedish funded. So we work with Sony, Ericsson, Spotify, and more. And the first thing we want to do is to identify the state of hybrid. So how is it working, and why is it working as it does? And hopefully that could be sort of a larger study where we can include many companies in the Nordics, so we can actually get more details around it. So we need more data to improve.
So interesting. It will be really exciting to follow your work in that group and see what you can kind of come up with and the results from that. I hope we get an opportunity to hear more about it in the future when you come a bit further into that project. Patty, I also want to get your perspective on this question before we move on to the third theme of today. We can see here that maybe Kraftringen and Storebrand might not be a part of the 70% then that experience a challenge with their presence in the office today. But for all of the companies that still find this as a challenge, what could they do to kind of attract their employees back and maybe do that in a cost-efficient way as well?
I think it's, in a way, it's really very simple. If you want to invite people to a party and you want lots of people to show up, you have to do some preparations. You have to decide what kind of party you want to have. What are you serving? What are your plans? How many people can fit in the room? Can they fit in a good way? Are you yourself a good host to these people that you want to join this party? And I think that maybe too many companies are reaching out for the rule guidelines and setting up some sort of points of number of days you should be at the office, or how many days, all days. Even a lot of companies are mandating now. And I think as people, we all know that that's not the best way to make good things happen. So I think there is a lot of responsibilities in the management teams to understand what is it that people are looking for, what is it that makes this place work as a community. So and actually it was just a little anecdote yesterday when we talked about this with other clever people, and one person made a speaking mistake, and instead of saying employee engagement, he said we need employer engagement. And of course that's not a term that we are talking about a lot, but actually it makes a lot of sense. So we have to have employers that are really engaged with their people, understanding their needs. How do they work? How do they create community?
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting perspective of kind of thinking as the decision makers, their persona is kind of a party host almost. I think that it's a very fun way of exemplifying what we should do in order to make people engage, because I guess it's kind of like walking the talk here as well. If you're engaged, maybe your employees also will be more engaged, and how the tonalities of how you're expressing different things as well.
Exactly.
Very interesting. I think it's time to move on to our last theme of today, which focuses solely on the workplace improvements in the office. So here is when it gets really fun. We have been talking about some of the challenges in the workplace today, and now naturally kind of raises the question here that what do we actually do then to create these amazing, healthy, well-being workplaces, and how do we also get the most bang for the buck with the money that we are keen to invest in the workplaces? And Anton, I think you have some data on this topic as well that we can look at, right?
I do, Sarah. And the data on an overall level clearly show that office improvements is a critical factor in order to retain happy employees at the workplace. And naturally, we're interested in understanding and finding out more in depth and details regarding this. And what we can say in general is that the improvements are generally in the themes of health and well-being, as well as community and social interactions, and that these are the main driving forces or primary office improvements that would lead to employees being more likely to want to come into the office and be thriving better at their workplace. And interestingly, if we look at the specifics here, the two individual factors that employees rate as the most desirable relate to reduced noise levels as well as access to quiet space for focused work. And this kind of seems to emphasize the fact that offices both need to cater to the project teams, the culture building, the social interactions, but also to the individuals coming to the office in order to focus work. And the key here, obviously, going forward, is to find a good balance between both of those functions in the office. Now, worth noting here as well is that we looked also into what services would be, mostly desired by employees in the Nordics. And a general theme there is that services relating to food and beverages of different kinds, it could be subsidized or better priced lunch, better assortment of snacks, or easiest access to snacks, are the ones that are rated highest by the employees in this study. Another clear trend, which is quite interesting from last year, is that we actually do see that a lot of companies are planning larger structural changes to the workplace. And this really does seem to be showcasing, the company's need to adapt to this new normal, this new situation, as compared to previous years. Now, specific initiatives relate both to office modernizations, as well as adapting the office with a redistribution of square meters or relocation of the office. And if we just take a step back, what we can see in general is that despite a tougher economic climate, we do see that companies are still willing to invest, and there is a significant structural change agenda among the Nordic companies just based on this data, which I think, again, ties back to the balancing act that I think a lot of companies are working with and to find an optimal way between the cost control and ensuring good, healthy workplaces.
Probably. And I think it's really interesting here that we see this increased well-being focus. We've been talking about well-being for a couple of years naturally, but I think that since the pandemic and say a year ago or maybe just the last couple of months back, there has been a lot of focus on the more external attributes and the socializing in the office, and we should come in and we should throw all these parties when now we're back in the office. So I think it's interesting that we can see this increase in what the employees want is the well-being in the top 3 here as well, and there is a lot of focus on the individual's ability to focus and to be productive in the office while they're here. So Per Christian, I also want to ask you here, because looking at this well-being focus and the ability to focus as the top of the employee's agenda, is this what you're also focusing on Storebrand, or is it what we should be focusing on to create the future workplaces? Or do you have any other perspective on this?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that at Storebrand, home office is not mandatory, so you should be able to do all kind of activities in the office. So if that means that people need places to concentrate, I think that is important to listen to. But having said that, I think we should focus more on the need of the teams, because modern offices are mainly built around a decent understanding of the need of individuals. But I think very few understand what kind of premises you need to build around the team. So we need to understand the process which the teams are working along, and then try to have premises that actually reflect what they need when they work in that way. So I think that is an unsolved sort of mystery. And the second point is maybe, and that goes back to the first topic, is flexibility. So I think we not only need a workplace revolution, but we need a revolution in terms of how tenants and landlords actually work together, sign their agreements, and how we in a joint partnership could adapt offices along the way, because it's too rigid and too unflexible in terms which it's set up in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because we probably haven't seen that much development within that area over the last, say, decade or so. So I think that we are talking about it. How can we be more flexible in our, say, rental agreements? But I haven't really seen a concrete case of doing that in a larger scale. We can see or what do you call it, property owners having a more flexible option, but not if you're like a big company, say that's Storebrand. I think it's a solution for that sort of organizations we haven't really seen that much of yet. So I think that's a really interesting perspective that you're bringing up here now. And also what you talked about, the creating an office better for teams. I guess that could also kind of spin over that if I'm have the opportunity to be productive with my team, maybe I also feel that I'm being more productive as an individual in the workplace. I think it's a very interesting perspective that you're addressing here. And Minna, I also want to come back to you here because you mentioned in the previous question here that you have a fairly new office, and I'm assuming then that is quite fresh and modern and meets a lot of the needs that we have in the future of work. But do you still have plans to kind of do some office modifications regardless of that?
Yes, absolutely. And I totally agree with you, Christian. Is that correct now? Did I say the right name? It's not always about the money. It's about the feeling and what we can do in a dialogue with our colleagues. So we have done studies such as an occupancy study in December. We do have these surveys that we send out from HR, and also input from employees, because we are not that big. So we meet a lot in the office and we talk to each other about it. And there we can clearly see how the input from employees goes well in hand with what our occupancy study shows, if we read it in the right way, because the occupancy study is the figures. That's one thing that is good to have. That's what we see right now. But then the input from the employees is actually the key to that. So we are working with plans. We have a group where HR, our digital department, and the facility management work together with these questions. And we are planning for kind of an open house where we invite all our employees to bring in their ideas, show what we have in mind to optimize the areas that is not used very much, and in order to make it more adapted to now. And that doesn't have to cost a lot. There are small things that we can do, but mainly in the behavior as well. But we need to revisit that. How did we work in activity-based before the pandemic, and how should we work now in this activity-based? So we do have plans, absolutely, but it's not connected to a high cost. It's connected to listen and to dare to do things and try different ways in the office.
Yeah, super interesting. I think you're right on it when talking about the behaviors and our ways of working and kind of enforcing that, because at least what I hear when we're talking to many of our customers is the challenge of kind of having a reset on our ways of working as we return to the office now, and just inviting everyone in to talk about it is such an important first step. And as you mentioned, it's kind of a cost-conscious way as well to kind of improving the workplace and improving maybe the employees' well-being in the workplace here as well. So I think it's a super interesting perspective, and also that you use the data to find maybe where you need to make changes. It's also a very efficient way of modifying the office, because then you don't need to maybe do the whole big adjustments always. You can find different areas where you can tweak it, I guess. Definitely. Helle, I would want to say that this might also be a bit of your area of expertise in creating good workplace environments. Based on what we've been discussing here today and what we see and the increased focus on mental well-being in the office, how do we design that in the physical environment? How do we create an office that makes us feel well?
I think the main starting point is actually having the partnership with both employer and employees, and really understanding what's happening in the organization, what's working really well, what's not working well at all, and what do we need to improve. So those are really fundamental questions. And when people are allowed to be involved, they have so many good solutions to the problems that they experience every day. And of course, that needs to also be controlled in a certain way. We can't just fly in each direction. There has to be a vision, there has to be a target, and that's kind of our approach to this. But I think it really is about being understanding and respectful about how we are different types of people in the workplace. We work in various ways. We have different personality types. So a company would usually consist of many different types of people and many different tasks. And that's really about getting that overview. And then I think instead of maybe spending a fortune on furniture that we hope will be standing in the same spot for the next 10 years until the next investment, let's make it much more adaptable. We have to have furniture that's easily moved around, maybe brought back to the manufacturer, exchanged for new types of furniture, because this really is the way going forward. We really believe that the workplace should be adaptable to our needs rather than we should adapt to a stagnant workplace. So that's kind of our aim now, is to be much more in line with how can we make this flexibility and adaptability happen. And I agree with you, Per Christian, as well, in saying that the entire partnership with the landlord and the tenant, that's a really, really interesting part of this aspect as well, because if we play together, we just play better.
Yeah, completely. Definitely. I think we have to find the good solutions to collaborate with our landlords in order to create those extraordinary office experience, because it's about the whole journey when we come to the office, not only when we come through the doors, that is our rented space in the office. I think that's super interesting as well. Anton, you also mentioned services here when we looked at the data, that we can see an increased interest in particularly services related to food and beverages in the office. And we have also been touching upon the importance of coffee already. But if I'm starting with you here, Nina, again, do you see any increased interest in different sort of services in the office?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I see or that we see a great interest in it. However, we do have some services in our office. One, for example, is that we have a grill outside that you can book, so you can have team meetings with your teams and you grill and you can play pool and so on. We have gym, we have all kinds of facilities, so you can do workout here at work as well. And from time to time we have different initiatives in form of bicycling around in the city, eating lunch if some people want to do that. So we try to do that already, but we can't say that we have seen any increase in the need for it. But maybe it's there. We haven't just asked the correct question.
It could be, maybe. Yeah.
However, we know that it's very appreciated that you can book a grill and bring your food.
Definitely, that sounded super nice.
It's
I would sign up for that.
It's just a small thing. It doesn't cost that much, but it's very much appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds super nice, especially now, as I hope that it soon will be at least spring or summer.
Yes.
In reality as well. Hi, Christian, what's your perspective here? Do you have any desired lists of services from your employees?
Well, of course, food and coffee is always important, so I sort of echo that. But we haven't done any in particular actions around it besides increasing coffee quality. So I think that is something you cannot compromise on. So yeah, just upping the game in terms of what kind of machines and coffee beans you have. That's actually made a lot of difference in the building. So we saw that as we started to put those machines out in a few places, that made people come there and gather there. And although people say we are having too many meetings, I think talking together is quite important in a company like Storebrand. So yeah, if we can use coffee to make people meet, also ad hoc and across teams, I think that is a good way to utilize food and drink to actually make something good.
Yeah, definitely interesting to hear. We're about to hit the target where we're supposed to go to the questions from the audience here as well. So I want to give you second or two to finalize that question and send it in through the Q&A function at the top. And while we're waiting for those last questions, I want to ask one question from me, a last question from me as well. If you were to mention one of the best success factors to future-proof your offices, what would that be? I think should we start with Per Christian this time, maybe? What do you have? If you had to mention one thing?
Yeah, I think I would say listen to your teams.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of adapting the office for that.
Yeah, and really understand it, because yeah, it's not something, it's just not one conversation then you get sort of the magic aha moment. You need to really understand and tweak and twist it along the way.
Yeah, interesting. Nina, what do you say? What are your best tips?
You may have thought that we have talked to each other before about this, but I have more or less the same. Make sure that your colleagues, your teams can sit together and work in the office.
Yeah. So integrating the employee's perspective in your office solutions and office design. Yeah.
Yes.
That's super interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much for those tips. Now I think it's time that we dive into some of the questions here, and I'm going to bend a bit forward so I can see exactly what it says. The first question to, I guess both of you can have a chance of answering this. How do you ensure that you get feedback from the employees regarding the initiatives and office improvements that you do? How do you know that the initiatives provide the value that you aim for? Are you working in any strategic way of collecting feedback here? Nina, do you want to start?
Yes, we do work in that way. One, we have the questions that we always deal with, that we let people send in to us. We talk, and we will also have this open house so that we know that we are on the right track. And we also have reference groups to collect what people say, so that we don't turn up running in all different directions, because there's a big difference between not being satisfied for the day with one thing to what's actually good for the whole team.
Yeah. Hey, Christian, do you follow up in any way the things that you try out?
I can be honest enough to say that I don't think we do this in a good enough way today. But we have a few sources of sort of data. The one is what I mentioned around the Pulse survey tool, which gives us sort of an overall view of how things are working. But we do also use more low-key stuff as whiteboards and post-it walls placed around the coffee machines, and ask people different questions. So that's another way. But I think we need to get to sort of the point where organizational development, including office development, is done in the same way as we develop our customer services, which is build, measure, learn. So that you can test things, pilot things, learn from it, and then further develop it.
Yeah. Let's see. Thank you. Let's see if we can have the next question here. It's directed to you, Nina. If it's sometimes, is it sometimes better for the organization than the employees to come into the office to collaborate, but they avoid it due to the increase of cost for transportation? Do you see any potential in subsidizing the employees in any way for coming into the office, or what do you see as the highest potential initiatives to still get employees to come into the office?
I can't answer to if we should plan for any subsidies. I don't think that's the way we would go, though. However, it's important that you want to come into the office, because you have work to do there together with your colleagues and your peers. So I think that's the most important thing, that the teams work well together, so that you really want to get there. Yeah, and also, I mean, you have a work. You're supposed to do your work somewhere, and you have some. Being able to work from home is not something that you can decide that you always want to do.
No, interesting. Yeah. I think we had a question for Storebrand here as well. That you mentioned, Per Christian, that the office should be adapted to the needs of the teams. How do you work to understand the needs of the different teams within your company? Do you create workplaces differently for different teams that you work so that close to the teams in designing your office?
Yeah, so we try to get better at this. So we have actually deep dived into some of the needs together with a few teams, and then also we made a pilot out of the findings. So we created something we call Team Space, which is really an office within the office with a mix of functions that you can book as a team on a whole day or 2 days. Because it reflects that our teams, they don't sit together every day, but when they are together, they actually need that kind of area. So it seems that could be something to explore more.
Interesting, yeah. And the next question here then. I see the office as a non-stop project. How do you work efficiently with continuous improvements in the office? I don't know if any one of you want to start on this.
I can say what I wrote in the Q&A as an answer. I don't think we do that today. We don't work efficiently with it. So I agree that it's a non-stop project, and then sometimes it's the people that need to adapt, and then sometimes we need to change the premises. So, but this is something I really wanted to be better at. So happy to talk to people to how to do it.
I agree. We also saw that we were not good enough, so that's why we started this kind of joint from HR, FM, and also the digital developments, so that we work better with all the input, because all these areas depend on each other. So I agree. We also needed to be better, so we just started. So.
Interesting. And I'm thinking also on this topic that you mentioned, Nina, about the utilization study that you've been doing. Can you give any example of what sort of area in the office that you're like looking into removing now and exchanging, and what are you creating instead?
Yeah. One example could be that a couple of meeting rooms that are open are almost never used, and we see need, for example, for what you mentioned about bookable areas for teams. So we will set up some workstations there instead, so that you can book it for your team, maybe for 1 or 2 days when you're in the office. That's one example.
Yeah, that's one example. Yeah, definitely.
I would like to add that it's really important that we see this as a continuous developing area, because when some of our needs are being met, we are very quick to find new needs. So this happens all the time. So when people have enough areas to do collaborative work, they're going to need more areas to do focused work. And then when that happens, then they'll need other types of areas. And this is just the natural evolution of the way we work. So that's why I think that partnerships are a much better solution internally in the organization as well. This will never stop. This will keep changing and evolving. And this is actually a really good thing, because we'll get better every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Definitely interesting. It's kind of evolving. It's a chain effect of what you're doing, a snowballing effect. One last question then here because we're running out of time. How do you see the responsibility as an employer for employees working from home regarding equipment and services? I guess loss and insurance in some sense, probably too. I don't know. Per Christian, do you want to?
I don't think we have enough time to answer that thoroughly, at least in a Nordic perspective. But for instance, in Norway, this is some there. We actually had a contract or a amendment to the employee contract where you sign up for that you want to use home office, and then you get more coverage in terms of insurances, etc. We also have an opportunity to apply for some funds based on the needs. So that's up to the leader to decide. So yeah, we had made something there.
Interesting, yeah. Nina, I don't know if you want to add something to what Per Christian.
No, I have nothing to add.
Nothing to add, yeah. Great. Thank you guys so much for participating here today, and for all of you guys in the audience for listening in. I hope this event has inspired you with some new ideas and provided some valuable insights that you can also take back to your organization and try out in the future. But we can see here, apparently there will continuously be some challenges, but we're learning along the way, and with the right strategies and the right solutions, we strongly believe that we will be able to create the workplaces of the future. So thank you for that. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we will now send out an email after this webinar where you can find the whole report. You can also find it on the course website already if you're keen on reading it before the email is sent out. And if you have any unanswered question to any of us here today, you will be able to, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We are very keen on discussing this topic further with you. And you will soon see our contact information on a slide here, and that will also be included in the email. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Now I stopped. I lost my words. Thank you everyone for engaging in this, and I wish you all a very happy weekend.